Amydala. Oh, Amydala. Have mercy on the poor bastard.
Once you've slain the vacuous Rom, or obtained 60 or more insight, the secrets of the Nightmare Ritual are revealed to you, and with it the many Amygdala perched across the city of Yharnam. But what are these enigmatic beings? Their trophy does confirm them to be great ones, but where do they come from? In today's video, we'll talk about the lore of the Amygdalas and what I believe is their likely origin. So without further ado, let's cut straight to the point. The Amygdalas are the ascended ancients of Ailing Loran. Once guided by the Pthumerians like the Land of Isz was, an ancient order mirroring the school of Mensis in Yharnam today, inflicted the Silverbeast Scourge upon the populace, while they themselves attempted to become great ones, resulting in the creation of the Amygdalas and the Nightmare Frontier. The Amygdalas are beings that, due to the machinations of the Pthumerians, have reached a divine state, but are potentially bound in servitude to the greater cosmic beings in Bloodbornes Pantheon, such as Oedin, Kos, and the Moon Prescence. This is quite a lot, so where do we ground this theory within the lore and the gameplay of Bloodborne? Let's start with the first bit of evidence. The Dark Beasts, other than Parl, and the Silverbeasts are only found in 3 places: Ailing Loran, where they're most common, the Nightmare Frontier, where they're again rather common, and the Nightmare of Mensis, where they're limited to the areas outside of Murgo's Loft. It's no stretch to say the Silverbeasts originate from Loran, and I believe the Amygdalas are no different. To reach Ailing Loran, the source of the Silverbeast Scourge, I think it's no coincidence you must tread through the Nightmare Frontier, the second most Silverbeast-filled area, and slay an Amygdala, who's carrying the Chalice of Loran. It also requires an Amygdala to enter the Nightmare Frontier, along with a small pumice-faced tonsil stone, seemingly an icon of the Amygdalas. And what do we see again as the ultimate boss of the Ailing Loran Chalice dungeons? Another Amygdala. With these connections, it's easy to trace the Amygdalas to this desert land, and I believe it's very thematically fitting for these to be the great ones of the previous attempt at enlightenment, with the Nightmare Frontier acting as the dream they occupied in their ascension, akin to the Nightmare of Mensis today, while Loran fell to the Scourge much like Yharnam during the Mensis ritual. Since I ultimately believe the Pthumerians manipulated the Loran people the same way they are the Yharnamites, I believe the name of this Great One race, Amygdalas, could also be in mockery of them, describing them as slaves in a sort to their own fears and anxieties, which led them to become Great Ones, only to find that they still ultimately are weaker and subservient to the other more powerful Great Ones. And I believe there is proof of this as well. When an Amygdala captures us while we carry the eye of a blood-drunk hunter, we're whisked off to the hunter's nightmare, enacting the will of Mother Kos for the hunters and their descendants to be cursed to the nightmare. While in the cathedral ward where we fight Vicar Amelia, we see statues of them lined up like soldiers or devoted servants, and they appear to swarm around the schemes of other great ones, like moths beneath the pale blood moon. If true, I think this theory makes Loran a perfect mirror of the fate of Yharnam, as alluded to by the blood ministration evident within the dusty tombs. You could even argue that the celestial emissary made by the choir is akin to the Yharnamite version of the Amygdala, one born less of fear and anxiety and more of desire or lust for enlightenment and ascension no matter the cost, even if that meant becoming the kin of Amydala, the left-behind Great One. While ultimately this theory is largely speculation, I like to think there's enough evidence here to potentially support it under some scrutiny, but I'd love to hear any corrections or alternate theories. The Amygdalas are some of the most iconic and memorable eldritch beings within Bloodborne, and I feel like this theory makes a small corner of Bloodborne's world feel just a little bit more fleshed out and in line with the greater narrative, as a direct parallel to Yharnam, and a boost to the implication of the cyclical nature of the Great One's search for surrogate children, and the rise and falls of kingdoms to the Scourge. While you could argue that the placement of these Amygdalas is a coincidence, or that the Amygdalas are just so ever-present within Bloodborne in different areas affected by the eldritch forces in the world that you can't really gain anything from studying where they're placed. However, the 3 that I mentioned earlier in relation to the Nightmare Frontier and Ailing Loran feel very, very intentional to me. The locations where we find all three chalices within Bloodborne are narratively significant and related to the chalice therein. The first one we obtain from Bloodstarved Beast is found in an old hamlet church, which makes sense as it's an old relic from the old time. Fuck, I'm saying old too much. I'm gonna leave that in. The final chalice, which takes you to the Land of Isz, which is in contact with the cosmos, we obtain from Amydala, which again makes sense, as she is the left-behind Great One that potentially occupied Isz itself. So it would only be fitting for the chalice of Ailing Loran, this sacred relic, to be within the possession of someone from Loran, a Great One perhaps, descended from this ancient land. Originally, this video idea started as a small part of something larger, a theory video on the dream being related to the afterlife within Bloodborne's world, as I believe every layer of the dream represents a form of afterlife for an individual or group of individuals. But while trying to determine whose afterlife or dream the Nightmare Frontier is, the pieces started to fall together on the origins of the Amydalas and of the people of Ailing Loran, and this all came together quite nicely in my opinion. Additionally, if you believe that death or transcension via shedding your physical form are necessary to ascend into being Great Ones, then you can almost view the dream or afterlife realm that they inhabit as a sort of heaven or celestial domain belonging to the Great Ones. There's a lot of themes around undeath, especially when it relates to the ancient Pthumerians and their undead, or the cremated undead of the Old Keepers, that isn't really talked about much in this game, and I plan on making a series of videos continuously going into this topic and into these various subjects. As mentioned in the previous video, in the hinterlands, the Hunters of Hunters perform sky burial so that the soul can enter the dream, which I think is very telling. We do see from the Hunter's Nightmare that the layers of the dream are stacked on top of each other, so it would make perfect sense for there to be a layer of the dream above the world itself, serving as the afterlife, the place where the dead go, at least when not prevented from things above. Sky burial is a practice believed by some to prevent the accompanying evils of carrion from contaminating the world, and this could be another case of From Software exploring the theme of stagnation or putrefaction, much like the monks of Sekiro and the Scarlet Rot of Elden Ring. We see the Undying as these stagnant beings that live on, if only in the stirrings of flesh, through Yharnam and Queen Annalise of the Vilebloods, and the undead are seen most often in the poisonous, stagnant depths of the ancient labyrinth tombs, where the corpses of the dead are entombed, thus denied sky burial or return to nature, becoming a maze of putrefaction. If we look at the notable points where layers of the dreams are visible from one another, we can piece together a potential sequence of how they're stacked, with the Hunter's Nightmare as the lowest visible depth. This could be seen as Bloodborne's Naraka, its depths, or even its hell. That being said, I don't necessarily imagine whatever dreams lie higher up are any better of a place to end up in the end, though maybe they are slightly better than eternally fighting beasts. The one thing I must greatly question, however, are the potential ramifications of serving contaminated meat like this on a platter to the scavengers, as it's likely to lead to new horrific mutant beasts, like the crows and snakes of Yharnam, or something akin to the great serpent that grew off beast entrails which now resides somewhere within the nightmare itself. Things which I theorized could be an interesting factor to explore in a potential Hinterlands area or Serpent's Nightmare area in Bloodborne 2, should hell ever freeze over long enough for From Software to make it, that is. For now, however, that'll finish off this video. I feel fairly confident in the Loran Amygdala theory. However, the sky burial aspect of this and the topic of the undead is definitely something I'll revisit and examine a lot more in depth when the chance presents itself. If you haven't seen it, I recommend checking out the Areas of Bloodborne 2 theory video that I posted before this one, where I go over 7 possible regions to explore in a sequel, 2 of which I mentioned before in this video to a less in-depth description, in the form of the Hinterlands and the Serpent's Nightmare. And if you caught that slip-up earlier, Eternal Ring, released in 2000, was From Software's last foray into the first-person dungeon crawler genre, and I've played it here on the channel before. For those interested in discussions on video games within From Software's spiritual range like this, you can also check out my Lunacid analysis video, where I go through the game. Thanks to everyone who's watched this far into the video, and I look forward to making more content like this going forwards. Thank you again, and goodbye. Oh, and like and subscribe, I guess.